Hi, my name is Mr. Peterson, and I teach biology at Benel St. Margaret's. And so there's a short, quick tour of quarter four for 2021. So typically, I would imagine you think of biology in kind of this way: what scientists know. And so these are the four big ideas that we try to wrap our heads around throughout the course of the year. Um, we we did a lot of stuff with regards to systems and utilizing free energy back in first quarter or second quarter, depending on when your child had biology. And now we're going to be focusing on um, transmitting information, which is the business of genetics, cell division, and then jump into evolution and finish up with evolution and then systems, thinking about ecology, how things work together. So I know that you think about like the content information. So these are the kind of the four big ideas that we're going to be dealing with throughout the course of the year. So we'll go back to free energy, which was photosynthesis and how energy flows through nature. That's important, but that was earlier in the year. Now, one of the things that I really focus on are the business of what scientists do. And so this is not, don't be confused, this is not the scientific method because there really isn't such a thing as a scientific method. That was made up to put in textbooks. This is really what scientists do. They ask questions, they create models and they evaluate them, they conduct experiments and they look at data, they play around with mathematics, learn how to use a spreadsheet, they construct scientific explanations, they argue from evidence, which evidence is the best to explain a phenomena, and they communicate that. Now, that's what scientists do. And so I call those the science practices, and actually, that's not my idea. That's science practices come from all over the place. The College Board, science teachers all over the planet talk about the science practices. And so those are the 8 science practices that you're going to see showing up when your students are doing work. Now, I'm going to assess these science practices, and this is kind of a showing how we're going to assess things over time. So at the end of the quarter, that's the only time that grades really matter. And so your students are going to be getting feedback. Yeah, there will be grades in the grade book, but you're going to watch them change as they get better. And so over on the right hand side, it says BEG. That's like beginning to understand, or PP, partially proficient, or E for EX for exemplary. So as students get practiced and improve, you're going to see their scores and their grades change over time. So, for example, and this is also going down like over the course of time. So, at the top is at the beginning of the quarter, at the bottom is at the end of the quarter when they're going to be really good at these things. So, for example, in the first lab, they did a I assessed a couple of things. So, this is imaginary. So, just stay with me. This is pretend, but this is what it's going to look like because I'm not going to assess all the science practices simultaneously. Every lab kind of lends itself to a couple of chances for feedback and places to get better. So they're going to do a lab, and they do yellow. So they kind of have some understanding. Then we do claim evidence and reasoning. That's what CER stands for. They get a chance to practice science practice 1 and science practice 4. They didn't do such a great job of communicating, and so on. And so over the course of time, you're going to watch those colors, and you can find these on PowerSchool Learning, like where you can check on their work being done. You're going to see that their scores are going to change over time because they're going to get more practice and get better at it. And so the business of giving feedback and looking for improvement is really what I want to focus on, especially with the science practices. Going along with the science practices are things called cross-cutting concepts, and these are how scientists think. So they think about cause and effect, right? We've got this phenomena. What caused it? I mean, at that basis, that's really what science is about. Systems. So we need to think about systems and how systems are put together. And systems could be a cell, right? Systems could be an ecosystem. Systems could be an organism. So systems are important to understand. How does energy and matter flow? Stability and change. Like what happens when we have an invasive species? What happens to the stability of an ecosystem. What happens when invasive carp start swimming up the Mississippi River? What does that do to the local ecosystem? Structure and function. So we'll look at the relationship, and we have already many times over the course of the year. Like, why does a mitochondria have the shape that it does, or a chloroplast for that matter? And then scale, proportionality, and quantity. Certainly, those things are important to think about. A little bit versus a lot, and what does that do to problems that arise in nature? And then patterns. So currently, we're looking at the patterns of cell division and how can we make predictions on what cells are going to do based on the patterns of their behavior. So those are the cross-cutting concepts. Those are how scientists think. Now, I focus a lot on lab work, or right now they're not really doing a lot of wet lab things, but we are doing things that are eventually going to turn into wet lab things. And one of the things about providing students with access to phenomena is we move from the learning about things. So we're going to learn about cell division to really trying to figure it out. So the first scientists, when they came across these phenomena, had very little understanding, and I want to try to replicate that for students so they can get past the learning about and deal more with the figuring it out. And then we'll eventually come back to that content piece. But really, the business of, if we look at this, this is a CT scan of someone's brain. When we provide them with the ability to ask questions, certain parts of your brain light up with activity. And so through the use of lab work, we can tap into that curiosity. So these are some photo shots of some lab work that students have been doing. Now, there's all kinds of learners in the classroom, right? And it's been a challenge for learners this entire year because things have just not been nominal for that. And so I've really seen a real tendency, I'm going to call that in students, a tendency to be dependent learners. So I'm not going to read these bullet points to you, but these are the things that I've seen in my students. They're dependent learners. And I really want to try to push them to be independent learners because in a year or so, they're going to be out of Benilde St. Margaret's and on into something else, a job or college or whatever. And they really need to be independent learners. And so one of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be pushing those dependent learners to becoming independent learners. I think that's a really important job for me this year. All right, let's take a quick look at PowerSchool Learning. Hopefully it's laid out in a similar fashion. So if you're on the biology homepage, you can find my contact information. There's a click to my Zoom room. I have second hour, that's when I teach biology. And then the other 3 hours of the day, I'm meeting with AP Seminar and AP Research students, which is that's a whole nother story. There's my contact information. There's an assignment block. So students have seen this already, and hopefully this looks similar to what other classes are supposed to look like. And you can see that they have or they haven't turned things in by whether there's the presence of a check mark. These are assignments from first quarter, but I just took screenshots, but it's the same kind of thing, right? So they've handed it in, they haven't handed it in. You can see due dates. If they've handed it in, then they've got the green check mark right there, so that lets people know that they've handed something in. There's also upcoming events which have those important dates and when things are due. That's on the home page. Over on the left-hand side is kind of the main themes of the course. So that's a drop down that opens up some submenus. So toolboxes like how to use spreadsheets or how to log into certain things. Then the course information is where you're going to find the business of like, for example, you're going to see transmitting information. That's the content piece of it as well. If you want to keep up with things that are going on in the classroom, I do tweet things on @science@bsm if you want to take a look. Sometimes I put pictures of the lab work that we're doing or something exciting that's happening in class. I also use Remind, which is a great way to push information out through text messages. I don't see your cell phone number, your students don't see mine, but it's just a great way to communicate with, hey, there's a quiz tomorrow, or this is due next week. So you can get those text messages to you, or if you want to get an email about it, you can do that as well. So all that information is right there. You can rewind that if I went through that too quickly. Um, anyway, I'm excited about the fourth quarter. We're dealing with some really interesting things, dealing with cell division. Eventually, we'll talk about the virus and the variants and just exactly what does that have to do with protein synthesis and evolution. Pretty good stuff. So lots of great things and labs to do over the course of this quarter. So there's a quick introduction, or probably not quick, but an introduction to the course for fourth quarter. Hope that helps.